The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Guy Ritchie. Here we go. So this story centralizes on a group of unpredictable, blacklisted secret agents led by Henry Cavill that are enlisted by the British government as a last resort to go undercover and do a sneak attack mission on a German naval outpost during World War II. The movie's filled with a lot of action, a lot of comedy. Guy Ritchie isn't one of my favorite filmmakers. He's definitely a bit hit or miss for me. I like some of his stuff. I can recognize his prowess and that he is a bit of an auteur and has a specific style that sometimes works well. Other times, it's not something that I'm a huge fan of, especially last year's Operation Fortune Ruse de Garde. I saw that and I honestly did not like this movie at all. So that being kind of my last taste of a Guy Ritchie thing, I wasn't sure what to expect. And, I can say I was happily surprised. I had a really fun time with this. Right out of the gate, there's a really entertaining sequence that introduces us to kind of our main band of these 5 spies. And it's a really comedic scene and gives an opportunity to introduce us to our main characters in a really funny way, but also shows their skill set and their action. I think a particular highlight right out of the gate in this scene is Alan Ritchson. His dialogue through this segment is just really funny, and it's a really great way to start the movie. We get to see some really interesting quirks that Henry Cavill's character has. I think he's a really fun, unique character that is very charismatic and enjoyable to watch on screen throughout. But yeah, as the movie kind of progresses from there, I find that through its midsection, it definitely starts to kind of get a bit middling. It's interesting, but you don't always know where it's going. I think that the pacing gets fairly clunky at this point, and I'll be honest, some of the subplots going on with Elisa Gonzalez and Babs Olismaken, I think the acting is good, and I enjoy their performances, but for the most part, you don't know exactly what it's building to, and we're cross-cutting between kind of our gentleman and this. It comes back around, and when things start to add up and kind of come together in the last leg of the movie, it becomes very enjoyable again, and you start getting the rhythm and you start feeling it. I think this is a common problem I have with Guy Ritchie films. I tend to find that the pacing gets a little off, and it's not always clicking for me. And I think for me, a big part of this is its lack of character development or tension that happens during these segments. Guy Ritchie does such a great job of illustrating cool on screen. Whenever there's an action sequence or a character enters a room for the first time and has a couple of quick dialogue moments, I mean, it's cool as hell. These characters are just fucking cool when they walk into a room. And every time they're pulling off an action stunt, it's cool. They're the best one in the room at doing it. That's fun to watch. But eventually, you kind of get into this middle place where we haven't done much character development, and because everyone's a bit like the best at their game, like all of our heroes kind of feel like they're the best ones in the room at doing what they're supposed to be doing at any time. And I think that kind of lowers the stakes. It does make it so the tension kind of disappears because you're not really worried that our heroes aren't going to be able to pull anything off, because every scene they've been involved in so far, they've pulled it off, whether it's dialogue or action. At times, this movie kind of felt like it was trying to be Inglourious Bastards, with sequences that felt like directly inspired by. A lot of the musical score felt directly stripped from one of the key themes in the Kill Bill franchise. It starts to feel like it's trying to imitate Tarantino a bit, but it's not really packing the same kind of punch. Anyway, just something that I kind of noticed. So moving past that, I do think that there's still a lot of fun to be had here. I thought Henry Cavill was super fun. With it being based on a true story, they do include other, real historical characters in here, including Winston Churchill. And then, of course, they have Ian Fleming, which I was not expecting. If you don't know who Ian Fleming is, he actually created the character of James Bond. That's what he did in real life. He was an actual commander in the British Navy, from my understanding. For him to be represented in the movie, I thought was cool. And I guess ultimately the character Henry Cavill plays is the person that Ian Fleming was heavily inspired by when he was creating the character of James Bond. And so that's a really cool thread. And I thought that they did a good job of actually portraying Henry Cavill's character in a way that it's not Bond, but you can definitely see how he would influence Bond if you were working alongside someone like him. Not to mention, I think Henry Cavill has been up for the James Bond part before, so it's kind of an interesting nod that now he's playing a character that inspired James Bond. Ultimately, though, I would still say it's a bit of a mixed bag for me, but it leans into the comedy really well. If that's your jam and you want to see it, I would say check it out because this movie is the greatest movie of all time.